Tuesday on Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand. Glad to be back for another day. Hope everybody is having a great day out there today and a tremendous show coming up. A lot of Vikings content here in a little bit. Film review with Andrew Krammer and my 3 hot takeaways. Got a little spicy this week, as Andrew likes to say. So we'll get into that in a little bit. My good friend Keith Rashat joins me for a sad edition of Vikings Poetry. Haven't had a lot of sad editions this year, but certainly off of 31-9 against Detroit in the biggest game of the season. Calls for 4 fairly sad poems this week. Another Vikings thought at the end of the show. First, though, what I miss, they finally did it. They finally made a lineup change. The Timberwolves going with Donte DiVincenzo in the starting lineup last night against the Clippers. Mike Conley moved to the bench. Chris Finch afterwards was asked about it. I thought this was kind of funny. Some people took this as kind of Finch being super defensive. I thought this was pretty funny and got to the heart of the explanation. So let's play Chris Finch post-game. I think it was John Krasinski from The Athletic asking this question.
Chris, on Saturday you seemed pretty kind of set that the starting lineup was not the issue. Like, what changed from Saturday to now to make you want to make a move there?
You know, I just read all the papers, John, and everybody was telling me, and I said, you know what, I should change the starting lineup. So, I mean, it was all about trying to get Mike into a group of guys that could accentuate his talents better. He, plays the bulk of his minutes with that unit. The usage has shifted in that unit. So it was really a way to try to help him get going. So
there you have it. He finally listened to us. Here's the thing. I don't think it was... Obviously, coaches don't make decisions based on public pressure, fan pressure, even media pressure. But I do think there is something to the fact that if a lot of people who are passionate about the team and who know something about the team are saying, you know what, I think this is a good idea, maybe it makes you think a little bit differently. Maybe you finally say, okay, let's take a look at this. And I think the way he framed it was smart, right? He's trying to activate Mike Conley Jr. And the point to this is last season, the offense is different. Julius Randle has been initiating a lot of offense with the Wolves this season with that starting unit because he's a pretty good ball handler. They like him to distribute the ball more than anything else. They want him to score too, but they want him to distribute. So he's handling the ball a lot. His usage is high. Anthony Edwards obviously is initiating a lot of offense too. His usage rate is high. You have Mike Conley then kind of playing this unfamiliar role where he's not initiating a ton of offense. And if he's not initiating a ton of offense, if he's more of a, go stand over here and be open for the drive and kick, that's not really his game. So move him to the bench. Move Donte DiVincenzo into the starting lineup. Move Conley to the bench where he's largely going to play with a group where he is going to touch the ball more often. And good things happen in the game just Monday night. They win 108-106. Not a masterpiece, not flawless. They got off to a slow start. They were down like 19 points in the second quarter. Took that starting unit a little bit of time to get going. But once they did, it looked pretty good. Especially the last 2.5 quarters. They probably put up 80 points, 85 points in the last 2.5 quarters. DiVincenzo was pretty solid. He had 15 points. He's a +1. Gobert had 18 rebounds. He was a monster, including 8 offensive rebounds. Conley was really good off the bench, too. 26 minutes, a +11. He had 11 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, playing with a group that, by and large is more suited to his skills. A couple other interesting points on this game. Julius Randle played just 23 minutes, and I think this is a good point to make, and I think Chris Hine has made this point a bunch of times in stories on this podcast, on social media, that we harp a lot on the starting lineup, but what matters more in general is the closing lineup. Who's in the lineup at the end of the game? Julius Randle, I don't believe, I was looking at the box score to make sure my eyes were not deceiving me. I don't believe he played in the last 8.5, 9 minutes of this game. He was just 2 for 10 in the game. He was a +2 in his 23 minutes. He rebounded well. his overall game was okay. He did have three turnovers in those 23 minutes, and I think he had a key one early in the fourth quarter that maybe helped make that decision of him going to the bench. He never came back in. They closed with a different lineup. They closed with a lineup that was more of a hot hand kind of lineup, and they've been doing that more. Chris Finch has been doing that more lately. So Naz Reid, 31 minutes. Julius Randle, 23 minutes. Rudy Gobert, 38 minutes. Now, it's not going to be like that every game. Some games, Gobert might sit because the matchups dictate that. But it's interesting to see how Chris Finch has been more willing lately to mix and match, not just in his rotations, but with the closing lineup, and then again yesterday with the starting lineup. Now they get a chance to throw this out there again. They're on a back-to-back tonight, I believe, against New Orleans. Chance that Zion Williamson comes back this week, so we'll have to watch that. But at least a good kind of progression for them. At least they're trying something. At least they're identifying a way to try to make this better. It helped, it helped everybody. It seemed like yesterday. It helped Conley get activated. DiVincenzo seemed like a better fit with that first unit. Ant had a big game. He took 29 shots, which is a lot, but he made 14, made a bunch of threes. He had 37 points, including 2 monster threes in the last 2 minutes. I think they were down 101 to 100, and then Ant makes 2 threes. Next thing you know, it's 106-101. Don't want to lose sight of Edwards in all this. He's obviously their most important player. I wrote something last week about how he was their biggest problem right now. That's not to say he's not their best player. That's to say the way he was playing in that moment, his attitude in the moment, was a problem for the team. Ever since then, had that weird 53-point night the other day against Detroit where nobody else was going, but he was just shooting all the shots he wanted. 14 for 29 in this game. If he's making them, that's fine. He still had 7 rebounds, 6 assists, or 8 assists. So I think those are, that's a great Ant stat line if you're the Wolves. You want him activated. You want him being in that role. So give him another shooter in the starting lineup, someone who doesn't always have to touch the ball, like DiVincenzo. And I guess the only downside of this is it took them so long to find this possibility. But maybe this is something that can get them all going forward. Gophers men's basketball, on the other hand, had the opposite result on Monday, a heartbreaking loss, 89-88 in double overtime to a bad Ohio State team. Gophers now 0-4 in Big Ten play. This was a great chance to get their first Big Ten win, but 12 for 27 from the free throw line. They shot better from the field than they did from the free throw line. Missed 2 free throws towards the end, I think, of the first overtime. Had a chance to win. Mike Mitchell Jr. misses a couple. He's a great free throw shooter. You make at least one of them, you put yourself in a much better spot. They accidentally foul Ohio State, thinking they were up 3 instead of being up 2. Leads to the tying score. Ohio State gets some separation in overtime, and there you have it. A lot of mental mistakes, a lot of breakdowns. And, it's just, we know this is not a great team. We know this is a team that lost a lot of talent, had a lot of talent go out the door in the offseason. But you've got to make up for that by being a smart team, by being a well-rounded team, by doing all the little things. They didn't do nearly enough of those little things, up to and, of course, including 12 of 27 from the free throw line. I did not watch any of this game, watched a little bit of the highlights, but I did follow it on social media. A lot of Gopher fan frustration. Nothing frustrates fans more than missed free throws, mental mistakes, an opportunity to win a game when you've stuck with this team for a long time, opportunity to see them finally get one in the win column, and instead it evaporates. So tough deal all around for the Gophers, but they really have nobody to blame but themselves. Ben Johnson, head coach of the Gophers, afterwards had this to say about how much his team is hurting right now.
Guys playing extended minutes, guys really picking up for one another. It's hard when you're trying to find your groove and you've got a game in a situation where it's right there, and it's right there, and you want it for the guys so they can get the confidence and get rewarded. So that's what makes it tough. And every game it's a little something different, and today some new things showed up that we got to be able to handle and kind of attack better. That's a good team. A lot of credit to them. I mean, they had the same resolve.
And again, will not get any easier. This Big Ten is a monster this season. Ohio State was an opportunity for them to get well. Didn't get it done there. We'll have to see when they can finally break into the win column. Let's bring in Andrew Krammer from the Star Tribune. Just jetted back in from Detroit. Had a better performance than a lot of the Vikings. Good stuff written on StarTribune.com and in your Star Tribune newspaper. Andrew, how are you?
Doing well, tired, but yeah, feeling better than the Vikings after that 31-9 loss. That was what a time to have your worst game of the year.
It was a butt kicking. I guess their only solace is it's not the end of the season. It's not the end of the world. They do have an opportunity now at Los Angeles. The road just got a lot harder. Like if they play better and win that game, obviously we've talked about the difference in path. 2 home games versus 3 potential road games is a big difference in the playoffs. But I want to talk a little bit about how we got there. I also have 3 hot takeaways before we get to the film. Number 1, Sam Darnold cost himself a little bit of money on Sunday. That's my it's not too hot, but I think he cost himself some money in that game.
Yeah, unless he goes on some playoff run. And even then, if he wins a couple playoff games, people are still going to wonder what happened in that big game in Detroit. The sample, and the thing is, the sample size for him is just so small. You know, we got the 1 year here. It's really so different from his first 5 years, 6 years in the NFL in terms of how he's performed. So any GM, whether it's Kwesi or one of the other 31 teams that might be interested in him, they have to weigh this game now as part of this 17-game sample and going on 18-game sample next week. And it's going to factor in. This was the biggest game of the year. This was a tough environment, a road environment, a hostile environment, one that teams are going to want to see quarterbacks win in, especially if you pay them 40, 50. He'll could command 50 plus million if he were to get a big, full, long-term deal the way we all thought he might. But the reason Daniel Jones gets paid the way he does is he goes on the road and he wins at US Bank. And we can explain all the reasons why. It was because of their fired defensive coordinator, but he did it. And that's why he got paid. And Darnold, I think, needs to do, just my conjecture, I think he needs to do something like that, win a game now in Los Angeles, and potentially another to kind of get back to where it felt that he was in terms of his value.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of at the point where you forget that he, even though he's in his 7th year, like he's not been in these moments very much. He's certainly played in pressure because anytime you're a number 3 overall pick in New York, there's that pressure. But it's not like the pressure of the individual game where, you know, it's playoffs or it's win and you're the 1 seed, lose and you're the 5 seed. He's just not been in those moments. And I don't know if that was it, but he missed some throws in that game that he usually makes. I know he was under duress, and we'll get to that in a little bit, the protection breakdowns, things like that, but he just flat out missed some throws when he had time to throw in that game.
He did. The inaccuracy, it did look like, you know, if we can play Monday morning quarterback as we do, it looked like the moment was too big for him. It really looked like he was too hyped up, wasn't settled in. And yeah, I think the Lions' pressure, the way they defended him, all those things, I think just compounded and sent him into a spiral that he really never got out of. And whether it was just missed reads, he wasn't pulling the trigger on open throws sometimes. And then obviously when he did, he's overthrowing TJ Hawkinson on a couple of 3rd down passes. There's a couple other misses, obviously, that he had. Hawkinson even had a catch taken off the board on a challenge because it was too low. You know, it's like the passes and the accuracy were just all over the place. And that's what Darnold said after the game. He's kept going back to that. People wanted to keep bringing up other things. Darnold kept saying, I just need to be better with my location, my accuracy. He did explain briefly that in the red zone, some of the accuracy issues, he said, I felt like I wasn't setting my feet. I was maybe looking to escape or backpedal, and you can read between the lines. It might have been because of the pressure he was facing. So I think it just all kind of compounded on him.
Hot takeaway number 2, biggest off-season investment will be in the interior of the offensive line.
Biggest off-season investment, boy, that's a little spicier. Because that, and it would cost a lot. Guards are like 16, 17. If you're getting a top of the line guard, and I haven't looked at the free agency, obviously, because Vikings have been busy, but It would be something, because the way they've operated with Kwesi and with Kevin O'Connell, they have not put a ton of stock on the interior offensive line. They paid Garrett Bradbury a very modest contract extension. They have really just kind of brought in bodies, whether it's Reisner, Blake Brandell, trying him out at guard. Obviously, they made their biggest investment was the second round pick in Ingram. And they held on to him for just way too long, and maybe it was for a lack of options. Although Reisner's been plenty fine, he wasn't their biggest problem. I thought Bradbury got thrown back on the first hit on Darnold. Brandell got beat a couple times, seemed to get worse during the game, got beat late in that second half. Even Brian O'Neill surrendered a pressure on a stunt. I think it was the initial sack by Zadarius Smith, where O'Neill gave up the initial pressure, and then Zadarius looped on the inside and got Darnold down. It just, everybody kind of had a hand in it a little bit. Yeah. I do think opponents target their interior and know that if we single them up, it's usually going to be a matchup win. And it's something we've talked about going back quite a while.
Last one. I am now officially worried about the kicker. I said last week, I'm not worried about the kicker. I'm worried about the kicker now. He missed another field goal, a long one, but still, like, it wasn't close. And then the kickoff that he drilled out of bounds to give them great field position to steal 3 points at the end of the first half. And he almost hit another one out of bounds earlier in the game. It was very close in the left corner of the end zone. Something about Will Reichard's face yesterday said that even though he's kicked in pressure moments, that concerned me a little bit.
They say he's healthy, for what it's worth. Okay. The injury, it was a right quad injury, one that he had sustained in 2019 at Alabama. It was a while ago, but it was such a serious injury that when he suffered a similar strain, which he had told me was in a different part of the muscle, so he said it didn't concern him too much. However, he was so concerned while he was on injured reserve that he consulted with, and the Vikings training staff consulted with members of the Houston Texans and their kicker who had gone through a similar injury, and it was at Will's behest because he wanted some advice from someone who had been there because he didn't want to re-injure that thing. Like, point is, there's legitimate concern from Will about that leg, about recovering slowly to make sure it was okay. Last week, after he had a rough game against the Packers, the Vikings and Will both said, I'm fine, he's okay. But today or last night, you mentioned that the kickoffs, even the first field goal snuck in, obviously misses the first one from 51 yards. Or the fourth one, it would have been from 51 yards, his fourth attempt. So he just has not been, obviously, the guy who made 35 straight kicks to begin his NFL career. And this is not the time to be going through your growing pains as an NFL rookie. So I don't know if it was the moment. I don't know if it was the leg, because this has now been over two different settings, at US Bank and at Ford Field. But all of these misses have come since he strained that right leg, because he didn't miss a kick until that was it the Colts game when that injury first popped up.
So I mean, how concerned do you think they would be at this point? I mean, I think if they think he's healthy, I'm sure they're just going to ride with him and keep working with him throughout the week and hope that he makes his kicks and everything like that. But like, they've got to be a little, nervous about taking that show on the road in a playoff environment where they would expect this game to be close, just like they expected the Lions game to be close. I mean, even O'Connell, I think, said at some point in one of his, weekly pressers, like, we're going to need him to probably make a winning kick at some point here. How do you think they feel about that right now?
Yeah, well, if O'Connell goes about it the same way he does Sam Darnold, which was to continue to arm him and empower him, and you know what, Sam, it doesn't matter, it's not your day, I want you to throw 41 times in this game. If he does that, Will's going to keep getting trotted out there to kick. He's not going to do the Mike Zimmer, we're going for two to send him a message kind of thing. However, I guess I'd say that the situations, the playoffs and all that, lends itself to being more aggressive, lends itself to fourth down tries, as we saw on Sunday night. Meaning that they're going to turn to him at least a little less. They're not going to be settling for three so often, but these games are close. I expect Monday nights in Los Angeles to be close. And they're going to need him to not miss these kinds of kicks. It didn't matter on Sunday because you got beat so badly, but I do not think the Rams are going to be that kind of a powerhouse.
No, and still, like the kickoff that he botched, that gave, that helped them get 3 points, even if he
was huge.
even if he kicks it through the end zone and they have the ball at the 30, there's a chance they get into field goal range there because they had, timeouts, stuff like that. But that was big. And then we forget, like, when he missed that field goal, if he makes that at 17-12 and they're kicking off, like, that was a momentum play, even if you can't expect a kicker to make 100% of those. That was a momentum play where the game was definitely still in the balance. If he makes the kick, they get a stop, and then obviously they don't. He misses the kick. They go down and get a touchdown. Next thing you know, it's 24-9, and they're on their way. So those were momentum plays, certainly in that game. That has to be concerning, but not the biggest concern. Let's shift now to the film. What did they do differently exactly on defense? You wrote about this Monday morning. Like, how much pressure were they putting on Darnold? I mean, a lot of basically zero blitzes that they threw at him, right?
Yeah, a lot of blitzes in general. I think the overall, the next gen NFL stats came out that it was over 50%. I think he was blitzed like 55 or 56% of the time. He was pressured almost 50%. I think it was 49% of the time. That's the third highest mark that he's faced this year in terms of being pressured. So this has not happened to him very often. The pressure absolutely got there. We saw him running plenty. We also saw him miss throws plenty. And Darnold talked about how that pressure led to some of his happy feet, some of his instability in his foundation when he was attempting those throws could have led to that inaccuracy. It's certainly not every misfire was because of pressure, but it played a part in it. It also played a part in taking away the Vikings' answers in their quick game. The Lions are such a good run defense because of how aggressive, downhill, and attacking they generally are. That means they're a defense that gives up plays downfield. They often give up a lot of explosive passing plays. Dan Campbell said this after the game. He said, we could not let Darnold stand back there and beat us. We knew he could pick us apart. We knew that we had to help our cover guys on the back end. This was a team that was without, Carlton Davis, their top corner. They decided to put Amik Robertson, their second best corner, shadowing Jefferson in a move that they did not do back in October.
Right.
And then as Brian O'Neill told me, back in October, they ran like 3 or 4 blitzes, and they did them over and over and over. And the Vikings obviously could kind of pick it up and get a feel for it. Brian said this time it felt like they emptied the Rolodex. They were just going through everything they had. And you mentioned the zero blitzes. That's when, for the layman, that's when they send everybody. That's the engage 8 on Madden. You want to send the house. That's kind of what that is. Right. The Lions did that 14 times in this game against Darnold. It is the most a defense has done it in a single regular season game this year, according to the NFL, and that happened in the final regular season game of the year. And the Lions they said it too. The players said afterward, this was a statement, and they absolutely went out there and were aggressive, tried to punch the Vikings in the mouth, push that offense around, and they made the Vikings look like a finesse offense that was not ready for this moment. And it stands out to me because when you get into the red zone, they were never good at running in the red zone this year.
No.
We talked about it ad nauseum and how Darnold would have to carry this load. And if he wasn't going to be hyper accurate, if their schemes were going to be incredibly on point, they were not going to have a counter. And that was kind of what they fell into in this game, where they get 3 red zone trips early in the first half, or I guess it was through the second quarter. They came away with 6 points and a turnover on downs. Like, you lose the game right then and there because the Lions can just sit back and just fire every bullet at you then from here on out because they know you're not going to hand it off more than 12 times the whole game. So that's my long-winded way of saying that this offense and Darnold are built a certain way, and the Lions just frankly seem like a bad matchup. I saw another stat that said Brian Flores has only given up, and I haven't fact-checked this, but it sounds right. Brian Flores has only given up, I think it was from ESPN, has given up 30-plus points just 7 times with the Vikings. 4 of those have been by Ben Johnson and the Lions.
Wow.
It seems like it's a bad matchup for the style of play, a bad matchup certainly for the personnel that they have. And the Vikings defense played admirably. They held up, obviously, through the first half, but it became too much, and you need to win a shootout against this Lions team.
Well, yeah, and you mentioned the running game. I want to circle back on that in a minute, like their inability to get it in from close, because then you're relying on passes from the 3, the 5. You can't just hand it off and hope to overpower Detroit. But I said something to you, like maybe it was like 5 or 6 games ago when they got a lot of blitzes that seemed effective. Maybe it was I don't know if it was the Jacksonville game, whatever game it was, where
it was the Cardinals game.
Maybe it was the Cardinals game where Darnold got off his spot and they just flooded him. And I said, like, I don't understand why teams aren't just doing that kind of blitz. Like I think blitzing 5 against the Vikings is dangerous because they can pick that up. If you blitz 5, you send 5 rushers, that's not going to work because they can pick you apart in that case. You send 7, that's the kind of blitz that I think works against this team because they can just overwhelm you and then you get Darnold in that space. And so I wonder if the Rams are going to copy this to a certain degree because it's a copycat league. Once you figure out how to beat a team, you see other teams doing this. I have to imagine they're going to get a taste of that against the Rams too, because they can't stop that flood. They don't have quick enough answers to stop those big blitzes.
No, they don't. I mean, the Rams had success against the Vikings, in their own fashion. I can't remember the blitz rates in that game, but yeah, they're going to look at this and try to, glean something from it and copy it. But I do think that the blitzing is an interesting point because you brought up the Cardinals game, and I think that was the game that Darnold was sacked 5 times. And I was scrolling here and kind of filibustering to pull up these numbers that I was looking for, and I posted earlier that Darnold has been excellent against the blitz, actually passing this year. So excellent. According to Pro Football Focus, he had thrown 12 touchdowns to 0 picks, 67% completion, almost 1,300 yards. According to Sports Info Solutions, he had the best passer rating against 5+ rushers in the NFL this season. Obviously, that was before Sunday night. So I do think that you're right, that when teams were sending 1 here, 5 there, 6 there, the Vikings, for the most part, were able to pick it up. The Cardinals game was a special example where they just sent stuff that they weren't ready for. Offensive linemen said, we were not given answers to this test. Like, we were not prepared for these blitzes. So what do you want us to do? That's a coaching issue. This time, Bradbury told me, this was not the same thing. We had the answers and we just were not executing. And the linemen never put it on the quarterback. So they kind of say things without saying it. And he he would always stop short of saying well, we need to block better. And then, the rest of the offense needs to play better too. And that's talking about the quarterback. It's talking about the wide receivers. Jefferson, I think, dropped at least 1 pass, had another ripped out of his hands. Jefferson also blew a screen. Also people complain about not being enough short passes. If you look at Darnold's passing chart, everything was shallower than 10 yards. The guy was checking down all night. He was just holding onto the ball and not pulling the trigger downfield or running for his life and throwing it away or throwing short. But there were moments in the game, early in the game, like the 3rd drive where they went to a screen and Jefferson just completely blew the block on Amik Robertson, who tackles Addison for 0 yards. That's the kind of stuff that was happening where nothing was working, and you don't go 18 of 41 without a lot going wrong. So I think the blitzing was a huge part of it. The pressure was a huge part of it, and it really undercut their ability to push the ball downfield. And the way that the Lions were able to rush and rally, they couldn't even get the quick game going.
No, I mean, that 1 catch you described for 0 yards, that was Addison's only catch of the whole game. Oh, wow. It was just a rough game for him. I thought Hawkinson had kind of a rough game too, although Darnold missed him a couple times. Jefferson just couldn't get it going. Especially, this is maybe the final point here. How do we attribute the red zone misses? You talked about the lack of the running game where you can't just run it in. If you get 1st and goal at the 4, you'd love to think that you could try a running play to get in or get you to the 1, and then you can kind of power it in from there. They just haven't been able to do that all year. They had some chances though. I thought the protection actually held up reasonably near the goal line. He either didn't have a place to throw a couple times or missed Jefferson a couple times, and those are the ones that just have to haunt them.
Yeah, I think there was 1 too where Addison kind of comes free toward the pylon and Darnold's looking his direction. He pats the ball and turns the other way. You got to make that throw. And, the window's only there for about a half a second and then it's gone. And that's how it works in the end zone. And Darnold has succeeded oftentimes in those spots this year. I think part of it is I think of 1 play where they would try to do some scheme stuff, right? Where they would motion Jefferson into the backfield, but then the Lions would pass off their zone responsibilities and pick him up. O'Connell would describe plays where we would have 2 play calls at the line. Well, 1 would be a pass, 1 would be a run. Darnold would get the Lions would show their aggressive front. They'd show man-to-man coverage, so we would check into the pass. when O'Connell was asked about why weren't you running it more at the goal line. So he's basically saying we got the looks to throw against, we just weren't making the throws. And it goes back on the quarterback. If you're not going to be throwing those balls in with hyper accuracy and timing, it's just not going to work in the NFL. And he didn't try to run in those moments either. The Lions were so aggressive getting after him that even when he stood back there, he wasn't able to gain yards or points with his feet. So I think you got to use your legs as a weapon if you're a mobile quarterback like Darnold in that spot, and he was unable to do that as well. So it was just a credit to how the Lions played. They played a lot of man coverage. I think the stats on that were like 66% of the time. It was the second most in a game by any defense this season. It was such an incredible amount of man coverage that it's staggering that the Vikings did not produce against it, considering how good they are. And we've gone this long. I don't like to complain about officiating, but we've gone this long without mentioning the Lions were very grabby in this game. Yeah. Not even too. I think they were just as grabby as they've been in any other Vikings game I've seen.
That's how they play. That's just how they play.
Yeah, and typically they're flagged 3, 4, 5 times, or they get chunk plays because some of those downfield shots. And Darnold actually didn't get many shots beyond 20 yards even off in this game, so that was probably part of it. But there was even one to Addison in the end zone where Addison's shoulders get kind of grabbed, and you're thinking, okay, maybe. Jefferson's complaining after every other target thrown his way that he should have some kind of pass interference. So I don't know if the guys are complaining too much and refs are sick of it. I don't know if this officiating crew just doesn't call that a lot, but the stats were very different from what the averages were for the Lions and Vikings, because the Vikings are among the league leaders in drawing those kinds of penalties. So it just didn't work out in the Vikings' favor that way. And the aggressive, sticky coverage. There's another one with Anzalone on Hawkinson. I think it was the third down.
That one.
His hand gets there
a little early. Yeah,
just a little early, and then nope, no call. Okay, and it felt like it was those things all night, where it was like it could be a borderline call, and it never came at all at any point in the game.
Well, we'll see if they can regroup next week. We'll probably do this a day later, and we'll see when we can do it. Coming off the Monday night game in LA, because I'm sure you're going to be hustling back. You probably have even less sleep next time I talk to you, but we'll do a lot of Access Viking stuff this week as well to get ready for the playoff game. I'll probably have Ben Gessling on later this week as well. But Andrew, appreciate it as always. Go get some rest, and we'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good, Mike. Thanks.
Great stuff from Andrew as always. Thanks again to him for hopping on here. Like I said, probably a day later next week with the Monday night playoff game in Los Angeles, but plenty to break down before then. There'll be a few Access Vikings podcasts. I think I'll have Ben Gessling on Friday's show, like I said. So plenty of Vikings content coming up, including right now with Vikings poetry.
Watch your dreams and savings grow with Royal Credit Union's 4.25% annual percentage yield 12-month certificate. Open now at any Royal office or online at rcu.org/certificate saver. Early withdrawal penalties could reduce earnings and principal. APY accurate as of 2/1/25. Insured by NCUA.
It's poetry time on Daily Delivery. Keith Rashad's least favorite segment today, because he has to deliver 4 poems about the Vikings to describe the 31-9 debacle. However you want to term it. How do you want to term it?
Well, here's the first poem.
Let's go.
What is the worst part? That you did it to yourselves. Enjoy the 5th seed.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I think you'll probably agree with this. I think Detroit is the better team. I think we can probably agree on that. I don't know if as constructed with all their injuries, they're the better team, but at the start of the year, Detroit was the better team, and I think they have proven over the course of the year that they are a slightly better team than the Vikings. However, they are not 22 points better, and if they had just completed 1 or 2 passes inside the 5-yard line, that might have been a different game.
I do think that you're right. I think that if you added up all of it, right, the totality of it, even if you took half of the players, the Lions defensive players who were injured, right, that they would be a significantly better team. Yeah. Imagine what life would like if Aiden Hutchinson was still healthy, right? And so somehow the Lions have become a significantly better team than the Vikings. That being said, they did have 13 players injured on defense, right? A couple others. There was more injuries during the course of that game.
Right.
And they had the opportunity. The Vikings had the opportunity right in front of them to vault themselves over a team that was injured, that was not quite where they should be, that is not having the luck that they should have. The Lions are the better team. But the Vikings could not take advantage of this opportunity that was presented to them, which is just so sad. And, if it had been like the last game and it had just been haymakers back and forth,
right,
and a couple plays determined the outcome, and you could live with that.
Right.
But the fact that it was what was the quote from the Twins owner? A total system failure.
Total system failure.
That everything just went haywire for this stupid team. There was nothing good about any part of their performance. The defense played well for a half, but couldn't hold on.
Right.
Because they couldn't complete a stupid pass from the 5-yard line.
No, it was like a greatest hits of things that you would worry about going into a game like that, right? Like, Darnold has had a great year, but is he going to be accurate, especially under pressure? They've been great in these like big moment plays, third downs, fourth downs, red zone. Can they sustain that? Is the rookie kicker going to keep kicking well, or are some of these slip ups he's had lately going to manifest themselves in this game? All of that came
by the way, that is a guy who looks broken.
The kicker?
Yes.
He kind of always looks like that, so I'm having a hard time figuring out if he's broken or if he was nervous or if he just missed a couple. Badly missed the kickoff, which was a big play. That was a big play that helped them to 3 points. That helped him to 3 free points. Then, of course, the field goal that he missed was a long one, but again, that's a kick that most kickers make these days. He had plenty of leg, but he didn't. That was not close. No,
he looks broken and at the wrong time.
Yeah. He's missed 5 field goals now in 13 games. That's he's less of a sure thing than we thought he was through the first 6 or 7 games of the year. That's for sure.
You can say that. You can say that he missed 5 field goals through 13 games, but that negates the fact that he was perfect through 9 games or whatever.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
This is an ongoing trend. That's not in.
It's a downward trend. It's a downward trend. Number 2, please.
The debate's over. And let's not have more talk of signing Sam Darnold.
I mean, that's a popular sentiment today and this week. I mean, I won't close the door on it completely. What if they go and beat the Rams next week and go on some kind of playoff run? But yeah, I think, Suhan wrote, "How can you trust Darnold after that game?" And he disappeared. And I mean, the pass rush was tough, but man, did he miss some throws down, in the first half, especially down close to the goal line, especially that one where he just airmailed it. Jefferson was wide open going into the corner of the end zone on that. I think it was a 4th down play, and it just sailed it way past him. Would have been an easy touchdown. He disappeared at the wrong time, for sure.
So this is the one thing that you can't say. If this is your cliched sports movie, this is the end of the second act.
Right.
Where the team or the player is at their lowest point, right? That they had the opportunity for success and they failed spectacularly. And we've seen him have bad games during the course of this year, right? And so if this is the cliched sports movie, then we're about to start the redemptive arc where he manages to come through in the biggest moments. And I guess if you want to hold on to hope, and I kind of do, although they're
14-3. I mean, they're 14.
Well, yeah, but yesterday was also that game was also a reflection on how there are teams that are just better than them.
Right.
Detroit is just better, so it's kind of hard to hold on to hope in that sense. Right. But if you do want to hold on to hope, and again, I don't want to go into a playoff game being all grumpy and frustrated like I was John Marthaler, but this is the moment where he can redeem himself.
Right.
And we've seen him come back from having terrible games. And this is the first game of any true significance in his professional career. This is the first one that actually felt like a playoff game. Last week was great. Last week was fine. But even if they had lost last week, then the stakes were not as significant as they were this time around.
Right.
So we've talked about it during the course of this year that these are human beings, right? And they're not their Madden avatars. They're not going to play the same way. Maybe now that he's had a taste of what this is like, perhaps he can now overcome it, and we can enter into, again, that third act of your cliched sports movie where he starts to perform again. But it's also very hard to, in this moment, to want to invest in him in the future, despite the fact that you could also construct a scenario where he's made such progress in 1 year under Kevin O'Connell. What might happen with a second year under Kevin O'Connell if you really want to go down that road? But I'm real interested in that 10th overall pick.
Yeah. Every time they show him on the sidelines, he looks like he's 16. It's like I can't get over how young he looks. So that's my problem, and not yours or not his. Poem 3, please.
Life's a cruel hoax. Justice is an illusion. That was a safety.
Yeah, it was. I lost interest in feeling bad about it when, like, 3 plays later, they got the interception that got him to the 5-yard line. So it was like, okay, the ball doesn't lie kind of thing, but that should have been a safety. He threw it off his offensive lineman. There was nobody that he was trying to throw to realistically in that scenario. That was a bad call. Agreed.
That was a terrible call. Absolutely horrible call, and it's clearly the only reason why they lost that game.
I look forward to the offseason rule change that makes intentional grounding reviewable, because then that will then be example number 50 from Minnesota sports history, where a rule that went against them was then changed in the offseason in time to not help them at all.
And also, I don't know if anybody's ever brought this up, right? But also, we have to acknowledge that Drew Pearson pushed off.
Well, we're coming up on 50 years of that, I do believe. Next, pretty soon. Yeah, we'll see. Okay, what's your last one?
Echoes of the past. More consecutive losses. To the Lions and Rams?
Right. I mean, I don't think the Rams are an ideal playoff matchup. They are pretty good when they're at full strength, and McVay is a pretty good coach. They kind of know O'Connell inside and out, so it's going to be hard. They can, and they can, and I don't even know I'd say should, but they're the better team, I think, in this scenario. I think the Rams played one of their best games of the year when they played the Vikings earlier this year. But in my when I think Ben Gessling and I did like this is like 4 or 5 weeks ago, like, who would you want to play as you're kind of like sifting through the possible matchups if you're, a division winner or even a wild card team. Rams were not high on the list. I think they were pretty low on the list of teams you would want to play as a higher seed or as a team that had a better record than them.
It's interesting, right? that they've had, and again, I guess we should also acknowledge that this whole season has been found money, right?
Right, it is.
Again, all those experts predicting their 6 or 7 wins were drastically wrong with this particular team. And it's been so much fun. It really has.
It has.
Last night notwithstanding.
Right.
But when you think about the number of creative ways that the Vikings figure out how to break your heart, to have a 14-win season and to only lose to 2 different teams during the course of that season consecutively, then having one of them then be in the playoffs kind of feels like exactly what the Vikings would do, right? Yeah. They can beat everybody but these 2 teams. And they happen to meet them in the last week of the season for the number 1 seed, and then in the first round for the wild card game. Yeah. So that would add to the luster of how the Vikings break your heart.
So here's what's got to happen. Vikings beat the Rams next week. Packers take care of the Eagles and wipe the Eagles out. Packers then go beat the Lions the next week, and the Vikings beat whoever's left in that scenario. I can't remember who they would play in that scenario. Probably the winner of like the 3-6 game, I guess, maybe. I don't know.
Most likely the 3 seed, yeah.
Yeah, so probably Tampa Bay, right?
3 or 4.
Yeah, so the Vikings could beat Tampa Bay.
They would beat 4.
They'd already beaten the 4. So they play the 3. They beat Tampa Bay, and then the Vikings host the NFC title game against the Packers for all the marbles. There you go.
Shut up.
Yeah, I know. Probably not going to happen, but there's the path. There's my realistic path. Wipe out everybody else good before the Vikings have to get to him. Beat the Rams, the Bucks, and the Packers, and then you're in the Super Bowl. That's my plan.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's a totally realistic path. I'm with you 100%.
Okay, thank you.
Another award-winning edition of Vikings Poetry leads right into the cooler, something we didn't talk about much yet today, but Kevin O'Connell had to address a report from Sunday, Jay Glazer reporting that multiple teams would be interested in trading for Kevin O'Connell if they reached any kind of contract impasse. Now, he is signed through 2025, expected to be plenty of very soon extension talks. He had to put the kibosh on any of that talk. Here's what Kevin O'Connell had to say when asked about it on Monday.
Yeah, I'm not really interested in kind of, I guess I should say, addressing the rumors or speculation. What I can tell you is I love this team. I love everything about this organization, and this is where I want to be. This is where I want to keep coaching and leading. So any conversations, in my opinion, at this point that really aren't about the Rams and the task at hand. My personal responsibility to lead immediate improvement off of yesterday, but also capitalizing on the opportunity to be in the tournament, my sole focus at this point.
Hard for me to imagine them letting Kevin O'Connell walk out that door. He has been an exceptional coach here for 3 years. 1 year left on his contract. This is how they do business. They wait till 1 year left on the contract, then they look at an extension. I have to believe he gets a long-term, lucrative extension, one of the best coaches in the league. So I imagine this is a non-story within a couple weeks after whenever the season ends, hopefully for the Vikings' sake, a long time from now. But have to imagine this is just a little bit of posturing on both sides, but this will all get itself resolved very soon. That will do it for me today. Plenty of stuff coming up later this week, so stick around for all of that. Until tomorrow, I am Michael Rand, back at it again on Wednesday.